Hello and welcome. How free and fair is an election when a government bans certain people from running? Iraq goes to the polls on March the 7th, but has barred more than 500 candidates, which could ultimately plunge the country into chaos, even civil war. The announcement to disqualify 511 out of 6,500 hopefuls, many of them prominent Sunni Muslims, came from Iraq's Accountability and Justice Commission in the middle of January. The commission argued that it was rooting out former members of the late Saddam Hussein's Ba'ath Party, although since then 59 candidates have been reinstated. The decision outraged the country's minority Sunnis who boycotted the last election but have been trying for years to find a constructive new role in their country after having dominated power for decades. US Vice President Joe Biden, who has responsibility for overseeing US policy in Iraq, tried and failed to resolve the crisis. He visited Iraq recently to convince the leaders of the Shia-led government to rescind their exclusion of suspected Baathists. Well, now Washington's worried that next month's election will neither lead to stability nor help the American troop withdrawals scheduled to begin this summer. So today we ask, will the banning of candidates in Iraq's elections undermine the vote and reopen the country's sectarian wounds? Remember, you can join our conversation with your comments by SMS or email. Well, today I'm joined by Dr. Saleh al-Mutlaq, one of Iraq's most prominent Sunni politicians and one of those banned from running by the Accountability and Justice Commission. He's an elected member in the Iraqi National Assembly and the leader of the Iraqi Front for National Dialogue. Dr. Saleh, I welcome you to the show and start by asking you, with this move by the government, are Sunnis basically being excluded from political life in Iraq?
Well, they excluded the nationalist people from Iraq, although most of those who were excluded were Sunnis, but they also excluded some Shiite who are really nationalists, and they do have difference between them and the existing government. So, and somehow, yes, it concentrated on the major Sunni politicians plus another Shiite politician too.
Now, of course, in 2005, when the Sunni community generally boycotted the elections taking place then, there was violence on the street. And I wonder, because there's, if there's a sense of being sidelined and excluded and being left out of any kind of voice in Iraqi politics, whether there's a chance of people taking to the streets again this time. What do you expect?
Well, it is really a very dangerous and worrying situation, because although we told people when we heard this news about excluding us from the election, we told them they should not worry about this, they should go to the election, they should vote, whether we are in or we are out. And we will struggle against dictatorship, against the oppressing government, whether we are inside the political process or outside the political process, whether we are inside the election process or outside it. But we could not convince people. People now are depressed, pessimistic about what's going on. They say to us, they're still saying that if you are in the political process and you are a leader in this process, you cannot protect yourself. So how could we protect ourselves when we go to the election? So they cannot guarantee their lives and their family lives if they go to the election. Plus, they do not guarantee that the results will not be fixed from now. If the IHEC, the election committee and the government is capable of cheating the people and fixing the situation as they want in a very obvious way, so aren't they able to cheat the people and to make the fraud in the coming election? These are the arguments the people argue, and most of the people we talk to them, they said we will not go to the election. And this is very dangerous, because then they will lose hope. And if they lose hope, then they will go to the violence again.
Now, Dr. Saleh, we had an email that came in from Colombia, and if I may put this, it's from a viewer by the name of Paul Wolf, who wrote in saying, Don't forget that before Nouri al-Maliki became Prime Minister of Iraq, he was appointed by the US to work in the De-Baathification Commission. His background is in the Shia Dawa party. It appears he's still on the same anti-Sunni crusade he's always been on. Now, you're in talks with Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki to make an alliance with him to try to combine Shia and Sunni politicians and try to rise above the sectarianism. Now, I wonder, just a couple of days later, Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki then announced this banning of the politicians. To what extent do you feel betrayed by him?
Well, actually, yes, we had talked together with Nouri al-Maliki, and he promised us even to give us the president's seat. But we asked him at that time to move some step towards the Sunni community and towards the nationalist people, but he failed to do so. And instead of that, he went to arrest the nationalists, and especially from the Sunni areas, many leaders, many people, just before the election. So we arise the point that a sectarian person who were brought up to be sectarian, and all his life is a sectarian person and belong to a very sectarian party, and also he's the leader of this party, it is very difficult to expect from him to be a liberal and non-sectarian leader in a few days or a few months.
Let me ask you then how you regard the role of Ahmed al-Chalabi, who's the head of the De-Baathification Commission. I mean, is he conducting a witch hunt? Is he trying to basically exclude those he doesn't like, his political enemies? Is he arbitrarily picking those he doesn't want taking part in the election here?
Ahmed al-Chalabi deceived the whole world and deceived the United States and convinced them some years ago that there is a mass destruction equipment in Iraq, and he he convinced the United States to go to invade Iraq, and now he is also leading a project to destroy Iraq again. To destroy Iraq by let people lose hope in this political process and go to the violence again, to bring us back in the first square. So Ahmed al-Chalabi is a very dangerous person. Ahmed al-Chalabi is wanted by the Jordanian government, and if the United States is serious enough, they should remove the cover from him, and then he will be taken by court there. He will be in jail for the rest of his life, because he's being wanted by the law. But unfortunately, he's being protected in this country. Ahmed al-Chalabi is not doing his agenda, but an outside agenda, which he is the agent to do it in Iraq, and nobody is stopping him from this decision. It is very unfortunate, because now we realize that there is no state in this country. The president of the country is against this decision or this action. The prime minister also says the same thing. The vice presidents, Tariq al-Hashimi and Adil Abdel Mahdi, are against it. The speaker of the parliament is against it. Everybody, all the leaders here are against it, but nobody could stop this event, which is going to lead the country to a chaos again. So it is a pity that we are in such a situation after almost more than 7 years after the fall of the regime.
Now, Dr. Saleh, we had a viewer who wrote in this as a comment to us on our Facebook webpage. Waka Vern Kacheche wrote in saying, "I think the ban will cause a new civil war." What are you doing to discourage violence among your supporters, Dr. Saleh?
Well, we are trying to encourage our supporters, actually, to go to the election, because if they don't go to the election, then we are in another serious problem again. These people that are running the country, they will run it again for another 4 years. And if they take the country for another 4 years, then we are in a mess. We are in a real chaos, and the country will go back centuries, behind. So we really encourage them. But believe me, we cannot even encourage the political leaders from another blocks. I had just received a call before I arrived here from one of the prominent leaders in this political process, Ahmed Abu Risha. who is from another coalition, which is one of the major coalitions in this political process. He informed me that within 2 days, if they don't return you back to the election, we are going to boycott the election also. We are ready to stand with your coalition and announce that we will not go to the election. This is a real danger. If this is going to go on, then we will not have election. And if there will be an election, it will be an election for them only. And then they will govern the country again. Right. And Iraq, if it's going to be run by them again, it is going to be isolated from the world. The legitimacy of the election will not be considered from the Iraqis, nor from the European and the others whom we received so many calls from the European Union and the European Parliament, and also letters were sent to the President, to the Prime Minister, that the legitimacy of the election is not going to be considered by us if you are going to isolate people and disband them from going to the election.
Now, interestingly, the President Barack Obama has made Joe Biden, the Vice President, his main overseer for Iraq. And Joe Biden asked for everyone to be able to run, and then any questions to be asked afterwards if there are any people who are considered suspicious in any way. Now, why was his voice so ignored?
Well, I think the language and the way he talked to the government was, seen that it was weak. Mr. Biden, before he came to Iraq, announced very good statements. He said, this election has to be inclusive and everybody has to run, and then the Iraqis will be able to isolate those whom they want from those whom they don't want. But when he arrived here, he said this matter is a completely interior matter. And that gave the impression to those who are running this case, they took it in a different way. They took it as a weak point and a supportive point for them. So they went ahead and they isolated us more and more. The case is not interior, as he said. The case, as most of the leaders, the American leaders here, they are saying that it is being controlled by the Iranian. And this committee, the Justice and Accountability, as it was said by Mr. Patrias, is fully controlled by the Iranians and by the Al-Quds Brigade, which is an Iranian brigade. So if it is controlled by them, how it is an interior matter? It is not. So I think there should have been a strong position from the United States, fulfilling their commitments to us when we signed SOFA, the agreement between us and the United States, which says that the Americans are responsible for protecting democracy in this country. And they are responsible for such a protection. They are also responsible for a protection human rights since they are here. Right. And I think the statement should have been much stronger than what was said.
Listen, Dr. Saleh, I have more questions for you. We're going to take a very short break now. Don't go away. We'll continue when we return. Welcome back. Iraq's general election, scheduled for early next month, is in serious jeopardy after the banning of candidates suspected of being loyal to the late Saddam Hussein. It's a decision that could destabilize the country further. We're discussing the implications. We have Dr. Saleh al-Mutlaq, a prominent Iraqi politician and one of those banned from running the election. Dr. Saleh, just before the break, you were saying that America should have been stronger and met its commitment to protect democracy in Iraq. But it seems that when Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki rejected what he called foreign intervention in Iraq by rejecting the requests of US Vice President Joe Biden, he got the backing of the people, that there was some strength in standing up against America. So isn't it sort of ironic that his position has been strengthened by the fact he was able to stand up to America?
No, actually, they are using such actions to make some fear among the others, among America and the others, that there will be demonstration and so on. It's only their party's member and those some people that are paying money to demonstrate. And people are not feeling the same way that it was understood that there was tension and so on. What Mr. Biden said at the beginning was absolutely right. All what he said is that the election has to be inclusive, and no Iraqi is against the introducing everybody in the election, and the Iraqis also knows that this election has to be for all Iraqis. But it was misunderstood by probably some of the American politicians that it will merit as protest from the others, but that was not the case. I think it is the responsibility of the United States to have an inclusive election in these days, because they are responsible. They said that they are going to have a responsible withdrawal from Iraq, as Mr. Obama said. A responsible withdrawal means that they should ensure that the aim that they came for, as they said they came for, democracy, which is the only thing left from what they said that they came for, to invade Iraq. This aim is being done. If democracy is not ensured in Iraq, so what would the American politicians say to their people and to the world? Why did they come to Iraq?
Right.
And we have now written papers from the American side. They assured us before SOFA that they are responsible for having a fair and decent election in this country, and an election which include everybody in this country. We have these commitments from them, and I think it's their obligation to fulfill their commitment before they leave.
Now, Dr. Saleh, we had a viewer who wrote in this comment to us on the show. Syed Arshid is the name of the viewer, who wrote in saying, the role of Iran and Saudi Arabia is extremely important in Iraq's future development. How do you regard that view and the idea that perhaps this dispute that's taking place is only strengthening Iran's position in Iraq?
Well, for a start, I think the Arab rule in Iraq now is very, very limited, if it really exists. And I think there is no rule from the Arab world in this country. The only obvious and very obvious rule is the Iranian rule in Iraq. And to prove in this situation that it is really influential. And to be honest, we were told that the only way to solve this problem is to get the approval of the Iranians. Otherwise, there is no solution for this problem. And we informed about this case from the committee itself. So just imagine what is the role of the Iranian in our country.
We have another viewer who wrote in, Siringe Minte, who wrote in saying, there will never be peace in Iraq until Western interference and Western troops are gone. In your opinion, do you think the West is simply pushing for this election to take place as a form of closure, to sort of almost wipe its hands of Iraq and focus more on Afghanistan?
I think that unfortunately now they are focusing on Afghanistan more than Iraq. Nobody would like to see foreign troops in his country. We also want the foreign troops to leave. But before they leave, they should fix the problem that they created in Iraq. It is not fair that you come to Iraq, invade it, and destruct the country, and make all the sectarian issues, and you leave it with a chaos. I think the Americans and the Western countries who shared in the vision, they have responsibilities to fix the problems they created in this country before they leave Iraq.
Now, I wonder, Dr. Saleh, there was a time even Joe Biden, the US Vice President, was suggesting that Iraq would have to be divided along sectarian lines. Considering how the divisions have taken place in Iraq and how the ill feelings exist between the various communities, do you see a chance of Iraq eventually having to consider the kind of move where they would have to look at splitting along those sectarian lines?
Well, actually, sectarianism is not among the Iraqis. The Iraqis want to live together. They don't want their country to be divided, and they were very upset by Mr. Biden's statements at that time. The sectarianism is only among the minds of the politicians, or some of the politicians in this country, because without sectarianism they cannot live. And part of what they are doing now is to recreate sectarianism again, so they will have sectarianism environment during the elections in order to pull the people towards them by creating sectarianism. Otherwise, they don't have the chance to win again at all. And when I say they, I mean the sectarian parties who run the country for the past 4 years or even 7 years.
Well,
the feeling that sectarianism does exist in this country is only created after the invasion of Iraq. We used to live together, Iraqis. We don't know who is Shiite and who is Sunnis. Most of us, either his wife or he is Sunni and his wife is Shiite, or he is Shiite and his wife is Sunni. So we don't have these sort of things. I myself, I'm married to a Shiite. So.
Well, Dr. Saleh, just
where are the sectarian feelings?
I only have 30 seconds, so just a quick thought. After 3 decades of minority Sunni rule, what role do you see for Sunnis going in the future in Iraq? Just a quick thought. We have 30 seconds.
Well, the Sunnis are part of this community. They should have the rule as the others having rule, and we should not consider the case that how much is for the Sunni, how much is for the Shiite. We want Iraqis to run the country, whether they are Christians or Muslims, Sunnis or Shiite.
Okay.
And unfortunately, these divisions only came after the invasion.
Well, Dr. Saleh al-Mutlaq, I thank you very much, sir, for joining us for this show. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. Remember, you can watch the show on the go. This week, we're featuring a debate on the fears of so-called radical Islam in the university campuses of Britain. You can download the podcast on iTunes. On the next show, Iceland's president explains his country's battle against the bank failure as it's about to face its toughest dilemma yet, the public resistance to repaying the Dutch and British governments after the IceSave scandal. Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.